Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It is March the 6th, 2025. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me just say, I made a video yesterday on the Ron Lyle versus Ernie Shavers classic fight from the mid-1970s. And I could tell the people who have left comments to that fight are hardcore boxing types. I get the feeling some of them have been following the sport for decades, and they've asked some questions about Holmes, Ali, Prime Lennox Lewis. What would happen if they fought each other? Right? And let's take this opportunity to just give some input on it. How good was Tyson Fury really? Right? Well, let me make a few points here. First, life's a perception game. You get older and you'll be surprised at how people are perceived after their careers are over, after having lived through the era. Right? So, I'll just put it to you this way. The public gets caught up in narratives. My father, for example, lived through the Joe Louis era. He was totally in love with Joe Louis. Right? We all have our heavyweights who we believe are excellent. One of the things with YouTube is I can actually go back now and look at the Jack Dempsey fights. No doubt, young Dempsey is a paradigm shift in boxing. But let's just say, in terms of his defense and things like that, I can now compare it to other eras. And I'll say, while boxing has some ferocious legends, if we're going to be real and we're going to actually talk about who's the absolute best in the sport, right, you're going to have to realize that some of the guys who look great on film have holes, right? Jack Dempsey's defense was an issue. Sonny Liston's legs, I'm not sure if Sonny, who was spectacular in the pocket, could actually move around the ring and catch up with guys. Fighters who had stretches of fights where they were dominated, like Rocky Marciano was dominated by Jersey Joe Walcott, their first fight, lead me to believe that the fighter had holes that could be exploited. So I need for people to understand that obviously I lived through the Lennox Lewis era. Lewis is a great fighter. We all understood that Lennox Lewis was a Hall of Famer in his prime. Right? Lewis, of course, Olympic gold medalist, on his way to that, medal, he beats future heavyweight champion Riddick Bowe. Right? Lewis beats everyone he's ever fought, right? Including the guys who beat him. Lewis avenges Oliver McCall. Lewis avenges Hasim Rahman. Right? Lewis is a great fighter. Now, that said, I wouldn't hesitate to take Ali, Prime Ali in the 1960s. I would not hesitate to take Larry Holmes over the best Lennox Lewis there is, because Lewis just didn't have the legs. And understand, in boxing, we can disagree. You can disagree with me. Please feel free to do so in the comment section. But just understand, Lewis just didn't have the legs to keep up with Ali or his protege, Larry Holmes. Right? Let me say, too, there are some referential fights. Larry Holmes against Jerry Cooney. That's a closer fight than you think. Cooney is better than you think. Right? He's not defensively blessed. I'm not claiming that. But understand, Cooney knocks out Ken Norton in one round. Right? That Cooney left was vicious. In that Larry Holmes, Jerry Cooney fight, you're going to notice Cooney just didn't have Larry's legs. That's a foot speed gap. Right? Larry Holmes basically just outlasts Jerry Cooney. Right? You know, the ending of the fight's interesting because Cooney hits the canvas really more off exhaustion than anything else. He just could not keep up with Larry Holmes. I believe that's what would happen if Lennox Lewis fought Larry Holmes. Understand, when you're fighting a guy with legs, the fight's fought at a pace that, you can't sustain. So I need for people to look hard at Larry Holmes. Folks, he's one of the absolute best I've ever seen in the sport at any weight class. Right? I would take Larry Holmes against Joe Louis. Right? Simply because, again, Joe Louis had a problem with Billy Conn. Joe Louis had a problem with Jersey Joe Walcott, who had great legs. Right? I don't know how Joe Louis would be able to cope against Larry Holmes's legs and Larry Holmes's jab. Right? And I'm naming, spectacular fighters in history. So the question arose, Tyson Fury. Could he hang in the 1970s? The answer is absolutely. Here again, I believe prime Tyson Fury, and the prime Tyson Fury is the Tyson Fury for the 2 years before he beats Vladimir Klitschko. Right, folks? You're talking about not just size, right? And it's historical size. There are very few heavyweights in history who can match Fury just on size. But you're talking about legs and timing. Right? You're also talking about the fact that when Fury fights Kevin Johnson, folks, there are long stretches of that fight where Fury's fighting with his offhand. Fury ambidextrous and could actually move in both directions. Now, the Tyson Fury who exists today would lose to the Tyson Fury of 2015, 2016. Right? The Fury today is past his prime. Right? Let me just say, the Fury today, though, destroyed Derek Chisora. That's a very important fight. Because since then, we've seen that Derek Chisora is still a world-class heavyweight who can beat a Joe Joyce, who can beat an Otto Wallin. Right? But understand, even a diminished Tyson Fury destroys Derek Chisora, who is front foot heavy and hyper-aggressive. Right? I have little doubt that Tyson Fury is one of the best heavyweights in history. I will say this. You give me the Tyson Fury who beat Vladimir Klitschko, I'll take him. I'll take him over today's Alexander Usyk. Right? Because there's a size gap there. Because older past his prime Tyson Fury went the distance with Usyk in a hotly disputed match the first fight. Right? So, let's go Holy Grail here. Who would I take? Ali of the 60s against Holmes of the late 70s. Right? The Larry Holmes who is destroying people. Right? Larry Holmes, Marvis Frazier, please revisit that fight. In a way, it's actually scarier than the Tyson Marvis Frazier fight. Right? Let me just say, Larry Holmes, who sparred with Ali, he was Ali's primary sparring partner. Understand, Ali groomed Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes was actually on the Thriller in Manila card. Right? Larry Holmes talks about how his family came to visit him at camp, and how Ali in the 70s, and I say without hesitation, the Ali of the 70s doesn't come close to the Ali of the 60s, because by the 70s, Ali had lost his legs. right? But Holmes's story has his family there, seeing, their family member in a sparring session against Ali. And the Ali of the 70s, according to a good source, Larry Holmes himself, busted up Larry Holmes. Right? Busted him up. Larry was actually bitter about it, because Larry thought a legend like Ali should have allowed Larry to have his moments in a sparring session before Larry's family. Now, what that tells me is that there's a uncle-nephew type of relationship between Ali and Larry Holmes. That also tells me that the Ali of the 70s, and let's say the sparring session took place around 74-ish, right? The Ali of the 70s still had enough to bust up a young Larry Holmes on the way up. So in a prime fight, we all get to heaven, you're ringside, you're watching 60s Ali against 70s Holmes. And understand, for me personally, that's the top of the sport. Right? I would give Ali the very slight edge. And let's remember, Ali had some tough fights in the 60s. Right? Henry Cooper. That's an Angelo Dundee, let me take my time fixing your glove fight. Right? Sonny Banks drops him. There's another guy, Doug, goes the distance with Ali, gives him a tough time. Ali's not bulletproof in the 1960s. But by the time you get to the Cleveland Williams, Zora Foley part of the 1960s, folks, I believe that's the best heavyweight to have walked on the planet. I would give Ali a slight edge over Larry Holmes. Ali had head movement Larry Holmes didn't have. I believe Holmes had the better jab. I believe Ali was the better athlete. Right? I believe Larry became as good as he was, in part because of Muhammad Ali. Right? I believe Tyson Fury is a wild card in all this, because that Fury-Vladimir Klitschko fight is a classic. That's one of the great performances I've ever seen. The problem with Fury, and it's a big problem, is that he didn't keep it going long enough. Just understand, he falls apart mentally after winning the heavyweight championship. That's the way success works sometimes for some people. Right? So, during the time period when he should have put down the kind of tape that Ali throws down when he's beating, Archie Moore, Floyd Patterson, Ernie Terrell, Cleveland Williams, Zora Foley, right? You don't have that set of tape of Tyson Fury at his absolute best against the best. Right? You just don't. The Fury who makes it to Deontay Wilder isn't the same Fury. Right? The Fury after the suspension, the cancellation of the Klitschko rematch, which I feel would have been a massacre in Fury's favor. The problem is I have to speculate about that. You get to him against Deontay Wilder. He beats Deontay Wilder in that first fight. They rip him off. But just understand, Deontay Wilder, as good as he is, as impressive as the KO percentage is, isn't one of history's elite heavyweight champions. Right? Then, of course, you do get a shining moment in the Fury Wilder rematch, right? But understand, that's a stationary Tyson Fury, right? Tyson Fury with Sugar Hill has given up some of his movement. The great, the best Tyson Fury is the one who had the legs, right? Just just food for thought. So you have a situation here of Fury in the early 2020s, right, who is a tad diminished, like Ali in the 70s was a tad diminished, right? It's stunning that Ali is facing Ken Norton, who didn't move that well. And whereas 60s Ali would have been dancing around Ken Norton, would have said, Kenny, when are you going to come find me? Would have been hitting Norton on the way in. The Ali of the 70s who actually fought Norton is in blood and guts fights. Right? Ken Norton, all D'd up, seeing out of one eye as the other eye draped across the other side of his head, is able to find Ali, is able to have Ali in front of him. Right? So, make no mistake, talent level, in terms of the best heavyweights I've seen, Ali, Holmes, and Tyson Fury get the nod. Right? Usyk, excellent, perfect timing. Right? He beats Tyson Fury who, Otto Wallen took the distance. Tyson Fury who reminds me of Ali circa 75, 76. Right? Understand, Larry Holmes, who's sparring with Ali, feels that his mentor was no longer at a level that, was at his best in the 70s after the Ernie Shavers fight. There's an interview here online, just Google it, where Larry Holmes talks about how the Ernie Shavers fight, Shavers heavy puncher, diminished Ali. Right? By the time you get to the Leon Spinks fight, Ali's no longer Ali. I would argue Tyson Fury right now, don't get me wrong, he's still world class. Right? He's still world class. His last fight went the distance against Alexander Usyk. But in my mind, I feel that prime Tyson Fury beats Usyk. Right? In my mind, I feel that prime Tyson Fury beats this version of Tyson Fury. Right? Let me close by saying this. I understand many fans, when they're hearing about boxing history, when they're looking at the heavyweight division, the names are glorious, right? Jack Johnson, Jack Dempsey, Joe Louis, Floyd Patterson. You got some glamorous names. Rocky Marciano, right? Fraser. Obviously, you have glamorous names out there, right, folks? I need for folks to realize that we can talk about folklore, we can talk about what is, right? None of those guys, in my opinion, beat Larry Holmes. Holmes is still alive, right? If you were alive during the Holmes era and you saw him against someone like a Marvis Fraser, you understood there was a sizable gap. I mean, sizable gap. You understood there was Larry Holmes, and then there was everyone else, right? I've looked at some Lennox Lewis fights, that are blood and guts, right? Lennox Lewis, Ray Mercer, for example. That's a blood and guts fight. Lewis is lucky he was awarded the decision in that fight. Now, Lewis could do it all, and truth be told, young Lewis in the 1980s actually had legs. He just didn't have legs like Larry Holmes. Holmes's jab is actually better than Ali's jab. The person who would know is Ernie Shavers. There's a YouTube video here online where he talks about how Ali's jab blinded you. He says Larry Holmes's jab hurt you. Right? Larry Holmes's jab is like Carlos Monzon's jab. In other words, Larry doesn't have to throw another punch. He's hurting you. It's a power shot. Virgil Ortiz has a jab like that, where for all the greatness of Virgil Ortiz's other hand, if you're watching a Virgil Ortiz fight and he's landing that jab flush with regularity, you understand the other fighter might get stopped. Right? Not blinded, not discomforted. Stopped. Right? Holmes is one of the best. Holmes today, an argument can be made, is the best non-active heavyweight on the planet. Right? There's really, for me, no one close. I know that's not what people are expecting to hear. I know we've looked at highlights. I know there's some other heavyweights out there. Vitaly Klitschko's underrated. He's one of the best I've seen. He's not Larry Holmes. Right? Vladimir Klitschko's out there. Vladimir Klitschko, Hall of Famer already. Several year run. You knew he was champion. Right? Does not have the legs. Does not have the fluidity. Does not have the imagination of a Larry Holmes. Right? So I always feel like I'm on thin ice when people start asking me about the best in history. Because no, I don't believe an Ezra Charles, a Joe Louis could compete with a Holmes, an Ali, or a prime Tyson Fury. Right? Tyson Fury to me beats Lennox Lewis again because of his legs, because of his length. Right? He'd be able to stay outside and box Lennox Lewis. You'd never see the firefight. Now, there are guys in history who would give these guys problems. Right? Prime Ali would have had a problem with prime Joe Frazier. These shorter, coordinated, explosive punching, fast-footed guys. Frazier, Tyson. I know Tyson moved in straight lines. Prime Tyson had you on the clock. You understood looking at Tyson, Larry Holmes, and let's face it, that's not prime Larry Holmes. That's Larry. Larry got to like 48 or 49-0 and then lost and wasn't quite the same. We understood Larry toward the end was not prime Larry Holmes anymore. But let me just say, the Larry Mike Tyson fight, you understood. There was going to come a time in that fight where Tyson would have Larry Holmes pinned. You knew that with certainty. Those are the guys who would have a shot on Ali, Larry Holmes, and Tyson Fury. Right? You could imagine a Mike Tyson Fury fight where Tyson Fury's dancing away. Tyson gets inside and is going to his body like he did Frank Bruno's body. Right? You can imagine a scenario where a Tyson Fury might not be able to come up with an idea to move Mike Tyson out of the deep pocket. Right, Joe Frazier, folks, the first Ali Frazier fight is not a close fight. Right, Joe Frazier dominates that fight. Don't believe me? Just look at the scorecards. Frazier dominates that fight. The second fight is tainted because Ali's allowed to hold down the back of Frazier's head. Right? By the time you get to Ali Frazier, the Thriller in Manila, right? Understand, I personally believe Frazier's vision had deteriorated. Right? Joe Frazier isn't quite who he was, but yet, let's face it, the Thriller in Manila is a jump ball. You don't know who's won that fight until Eddie Futch pulls the plug. Because Eddie knew something we didn't know at the time. Frazier's blind in one eye, and of course Ali wisely had the other eye closed practically. Right? Frazier's going off shadows and colors. Anyway, those are my thoughts. If you ask me to name a big three in terms of talent, in terms of me just watching the sport and looking at films, right? The Ali of the 60s, the Holmes of the 70s, right? The Larry Holmes who fights Jerry Cooney. Folks, I understand as you watch the fight, you don't see Holmes landing the big punches. It's not like he distinguishes himself that much from Jerry Cooney. The bottom line is Jerry Cooney is all dressed up with nowhere to go. Right? Cooney's fighting a ghost. He can't keep up with Larry Holmes. Eventually, Cooney hits the canvas off exhaustion. I know Holmes hit him with a shot, but look at how tired Cooney is. Right? His corner stops the fight because they understand their fighter has nothing left. Take out Cooney, swap in Joe Louis. I believe the same thing would have happened. Take out Joe Louis, swap in Lennox Lewis. I believe the same thing would have happened. Larry Holmes has a sledgehammer jab. It's a sledgehammer. Heavyweight version of Virgil Ortiz's jab. Larry's jab's mobile. Right? Larry can move with the mobile jab. In fact, if you're going to think about who is the best heavyweight in history, I believe it starts with the mobile jab. Right? I'll name three of the best. Ali, Holmes, Tyson Fury. To me, if you don't have a back foot and you don't have a mobile jab, you're going to have problems. Now, I also agree, there's a caveat to all this. I believe this guy's underrated. Right? A very front foot heavy, two-handed slugger with defense. Right? You can't be a slugger, not have defense, and think you're going to deal with the three assassins I just named. Right? Guys who, can squeeze punches in holes. A guy with defense, an aggressive front foot. Right? In other words, a guy who could get across the ring at you. A guy with his own great jab. In other words, he has the option as he's trying to hunt you down to stop hunting, to hover, and to bludgeon you with his own jab. And this guy had a 2x4 for a jab. George Foreman is one of the few sluggers in history who I think can hang with these guys. So I believe Tyson, Frazier, who I both think move much better than Rocky Marciano. Right? I think those guys, quick, fast-footed, heavy-handed guys, would give the big three problems. I believe George Foreman, it's a different dynamic. Big guy, their size, coming in, would give these guys problems. I'll say when you're judging heavyweights, and I know this is controversial, when you're judging heavyweights, you cannot go by the length of their reigns. Right? Sonny Liston probably would have been heavyweight for years. It's speculation on my part. It's just that one of the few guys in history who brought a dynamic Sonny couldn't handle. Right? Timing, a back foot, hand speed, feints. Ali just happened to be a contemporary. Right? You look at Liston, he destroys the heavyweight division. I know he has one questionable loss in his past, and Liston's mobbed up. I'm not here to say he was a Boy Scout. Right? There's some question on whether Liston's loss is legit. But just understand, Liston is mowing through the heavyweight division to the point where heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson goes to the White House, and President Kennedy has one bit of advice to him. It's don't fight Sonny Liston. Right? Then Liston mows through the heavyweight division after losing the Ali rematch. Right? The Phantom Punch fight. Just understand nobody could hang in the pocket. Just understand there are very few guys who could move in the 60s, right? Eddie Machen could move somewhat like Ali. But other than those guys, right, there's really nobody who can move in the 60s like Ali. And Liston happened to run into him. Right? Foreman, and somebody here took exception to my statement that Foreman got a short count in the Rumble in the Jungle. And I'm not here to say Foreman didn't get hit in some fights, right? Obviously, the Ron Lyle fight, Foreman's on the canvas twice. right? The second knockdown is a face-first knockdown. I'm not saying Foreman didn't get hit in some fights. But, what I am saying is Foreman loses to Ali. Ali, who fought Ken Norton, 3 times? Who fought Joe Frazier 3 times? Never fights Foreman again. that should tell you all you need to know about how dangerous George Foreman was. Right? And, of course, during Foreman's reign, he does blow out Ken Norton. Right? He does. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Please, don't be bashful. I understand we have many different views. This is the greatness of boxing. You can get a group together. We can all watch the same fights. We can all watch the same films. And people in good faith could have very different opinions. I could tell you, with my dad, you'd be hearing Joe Louis a lot in the conversation, right? I'm sure for others, they'd be naming other fighters, right? Ali, by the way, I mentioned Eddie Machen. Ali actually believed looking at Liston against Eddie Machen. That's the moment where Ali thought he could beat Sonny Liston, right? History is flooded with Eddie Machens. Guys who, fought some major fighters, had a lot going on, inspired other fighters, but who history has forgotten. If you have some of those fighters in mind that you want to talk about, please use this forum. Please use the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.